In a world where the dead have risen from their graves, their bloodthirsty instincts lead them to attack everything in sight. But if they could be cured and regain their humanity, could society accept them once more? These are the cured zombies. The government has developed a new medication that can regenerate the neural cells of zombies, restoring their brains to normal, free from their bloodthirsty instincts. They are no different from ordinary people, except for their pallid skin and dilated pupils. The government has also discarded the terrifying term, now referring to them as partially deceased syndrome sufferers, or PDS for short. The government assesses their condition to ensure they pose no threat, then arranges for them to live with their families again. The condition is that they must disguise their skin and pupil color. Kieran has received this qualification, and the joy of reunion overwhelms his mother, Sue, with excitement. Seeing his son, Kieran, disguised, his father, Steve, is at a loss for words. Steve never imagined his son would be in this state. The current Kieran bears no resemblance to a zombie. Meanwhile, the villagers of Roarton village are in the church, engaged in a heated debate. It turns out, 4 years ago, this was the origin of the undead's resurrection. Zombies swept through the entire village, but the government failed to rescue in time. Thus, the villagers formed a human volunteer army, and other regions followed suit, securing a glimmer of hope during the initial outbreak of zombies. However, now the government wants them to accept the return of PDS, which has met with unanimous resistance from the villagers. Soon after, Kieran and his parents head home. His parents talk about the changes that have occurred over the years. Eager to make up for lost time, unknowingly, they arrive at Roarton village. Just as they entered the village, they came face to face with villagers who had just finished a meeting. His parents hurriedly instructed Kieran to duck down and covered him with a coat. At this moment, their neighbor Ken walked over, wanting to hitch a ride with them. They make various excuses to refuse, but Ken insists on getting in the car, just as Kieran's presence is about to be revealed. Shirley, not far away, speaks up, saving them from a close call, and they safely return home. But no sooner had they arrived home than Shirley came looking for them, saying she already knew Kieran had returned. It turns out, she received a call from the government a few months ago, and now Shirley is a PDS care officer. She came to teach them how to use the medication developed by the government. Kieran must now inject it daily to maintain his humanity, and over time, Kieran might revert back to a real human. As the medication is administered, Kieran's mind flashes back to his experiences as a zombie, experiences that haunt him. At night, his parents make Kieran's favorite lamb dish. However, Kieran no longer needs to eat, but he still picks up the knife and fork, pretending to savor the taste of the lamb. While they are enjoying themselves, Kieran's sister, Jem, returns, but the reunion isn't as Kieran had imagined.
I'm not coming in until that disappears.
Her words leave Kieran feeling dejected, and he retreats to his room, pulling out a box from under his bed that contains photos of him and his best friend, Rick. Their friendship has transcended. In his sleep, Kieran dreams of the memory that haunts him. He and another zombie attacked a girl. Then they shared her brain, the taste lingering in his mouth as if it was still there. Kieran woke up and saw the girl next to his bed, and the next second she was his sister Jem. Jem confronts Kieran, asking what exactly he is, questioning if the gentle brother she once knew has been possessed by a demon. However, Kieran's denial was not recognized by Jem, until Kieran reveals a secret only known between the siblings, which finally makes Jem acknowledge Kieran's identity. But Jem still resents Kieran for choosing suicide. Without even leaving a note, Kieran explains that he chose to end his life because he couldn't bear the news of Rick's death in combat, not realizing the pain it would cause his family. All Kieran can do is repeatedly apologize, but Jem is unyielding, furiously throwing a cup at Kieran before running back to her room. Since the dead rose again, Jem joined the human volunteer force to protect her family, having killed hundreds of zombies with her own hands. Now, the former zombie slayer has a zombie brother, which Jem finds hard to accept. Meanwhile, Kieran goes to the computer. He looks at the website address his roommate told him about, a site created by a PDS called the Undead Prophet.
I know how you feel. I know how you feel because I was once where you are now. Frightened, confused, filled to the brim with guilt. A divine purpose that must be fulfilled. For as they shall rise from the dead, they are as the angels which are in heaven.
Inside the church, Father Audie calls in Bill, the leader of the human volunteers. Even though the zombies have been cured, Audie still harbors mistrust towards PDS. Audie firmly believes that PDS are still incarnations of the devil. He asserts that Bill is a warrior ordained by God, and Bill should eradicate the evil from the world on his behalf. Audie presents a document indicating that there is currently a PDS in Roarton village. Subsequently, under Audie's persuasion, Bill's blood boils with fervor instantly. He goes home to grab his weapon and summons all the members for a roundup. Jem, who was drinking alone, also receives the notice and immediately realizes Kieran's exposure. She rushes home to join her parents in retrieving their survival gear from the storage shed behind the house. Clearly, those who survived the zombie crisis are no easy targets. Steve guards the front door with a baseball bat. Sue crouches at the back door with a chainsaw, while Jem watches from the second floor. As two jeeps park at the front, the family grows tense. Soon, the doorbell rings, and Steve sees Dean standing at the door. Relieved to find Dean without hostility, Steve opens the door, glad to hear Dean is here for Jem. Jem then followed Dean to the street, where they drag a woman from Ken's house, and Ken follows, trying to intervene but is stopped by a man. The woman is Ken's deceased wife, whom Bill had attended the funeral of. Ken tries to claim she is his wife's twin sister, but Bill doesn't believe it. He raised his gun to the woman's head, but he couldn't pull the trigger. Her normal appearance makes him feel as if killing her would be no different from murdering a person. So, Bill asks the woman to remove her contact lenses, while Ken desperately signals to the woman not to do so from the sidelines. But thinking Bill will spare her, she removes them anyway, as her dilated pupils become visible.
That's more like it.
Everything happening on the street is witnessed by Kieran from upstairs. When Bill returned home, he saw a soldier sitting there. Bill thought he was coming to arrest him and couldn't help but curse that nowadays the living are not as good as PDS. Janet, Bill's wife, steps forward to explain.
They found Rick.
Rick?
Imitate found him in Afghanistan.
Found his body, eh?
It's more than that.
Oh, he's alive! They found him alive!
Partially.
The army has found Bill's son Rick, who was killed in action, but Rick is now a PDS sufferer as well. Upon hearing the news, Bill, dejected, went to Rick's room. The son of the leader of the rebellion against PDS is now returning as a PDS sufferer. How ridiculous! Yet, looking at his son's belongings in the room, Bill finally made up his mind. The next day, Bill put away Rick's portrait and, together with his wife, attended a ceremony commemorating zombie victims, where he publicly announced Rick's return. This caused a buzz among the villagers, but Bill, ignoring them all, firmly took his wife's hand and left without looking back. As the military vehicle carrying Rick approached, the villagers gathered in front of Bill's house. They thought that the moment Bill saw his son, he would immediately pull out a gun and shoot him in the head. Given that Bill was their leader, however, the instant father and son shook hands shattered people's speculations. Perhaps Rick's return could bring a different atmosphere to the village. Meanwhile, Kieran, looking at the bloodstains left on the streets last night and staring blankly out of the window at Ken, felt a roar of indignation within him. So, he sneaked out while his father was out working, luckily unnoticed by passers-by. Kieran went to a cemetery, the origin of the undead's resurrection. Countless undead had emerged from here, and Kieran was among them. He looked at his own tombstone, actually wishing he was still lying inside it, to at least escape the troubles of the mundane world. Lost in thought, Kieran was interrupted by a noise not far away. Fearing discovery, he hid behind a tombstone. Then, a girl approached him, and Kieran, frightened, ran away. On the road, Kieran grabbed an iron rod to threaten the girl to back off, but she threw herself at him, and the iron rod instantly pierced her stomach, just when Kieran thought he had caused a big trouble.
Your face! Already dead, Dum Dum! I'm Amy Dyer.
Amy, clearly an optimistic girl, was not shy about her status and discussed with Kieran whose epitaph sounded better. Amy saw through Kieran's troubles, feeling guilty and extremely insecure about her PDS status and actions as a zombie. So, Amy took him to a village amusement park and started playing on the thrilling swing with Kieran. Amy said that after disguising, "I'm actually no different from ordinary people, and now we have become immortal. Time will not pass on us. Our resurrection is a gift from God. You should not feel inferior because of your PDS status." Moreover, the actions when becoming zombies were purely out of survival instinct. Humans can treat various animals as food simply because of desire, while we, the resurrected, hunted humans only for survival. Are we wrong then? Clearly, Amy was a follower of that undead prophet, and her words brought a long-lost smile to Kieran's face. But the next second,
Kieran Walker? I went to his funeral. You're a rotter. Hey, he's a rotter!
Kieran ran away frightened by a man, aimlessly walking on the street, vaguely seeing the girl who was eaten again. Following the figure, Kieran found a missing person notice for Lisa on a public notice board. At that moment, Kieran had an idea. He took the missing person notice and returned home before his parents came back. On the other side, Rick was having a shooting contest with his father. His AK was so precise that every bullet hit its target, but Bill's shots were not as accurate. The family seemed to return to the warm moments of the past. Having just seen Kieran's sister, Rick casually asked about Kieran. The answer he got was that Kieran had long committed suicide, and Bill even mocked it as the act of a coward. But this remark struck Rick. Rick returned to his room, deeply distressed. At that moment, Bill walked in and, seeing his son's low spirits, suggested taking him to the bar to celebrate his return. Meanwhile, in the bar, the village assistant Philip hung a sign in front of the bathroom corridor, designating it as the area for PDS sufferers in the bar. Soon after, Bill's family arrived. Philip wanted to guide Rick to the designated area, but Bill ignored him, loudly announcing they were there to celebrate Rick's return. But the people in the bar did not echo Bill's enthusiasm. They were whispering about Bill and his PDS son, but Bill didn't care about them. He just glared around fiercely. Rick talked about his experiences in the military with his former friends, not avoiding the topic of his own death. Bill hands Rick a glass of wine and tells him to get drunk tonight. Rick, reluctantly, downed the drink but ended up rushing to the bathroom to vomit uncontrollably the next second. His PDS condition meant he could no longer eat or drink. His decaying organs had ceased to function. Yet, Rick wanted to act like a normal person, to prove he was still the Rick his parents knew. At that time, Kieran's family was having dinner. Unexpectedly, Amy found her way here, revealing her zombie appearance without any disguise. Kieran had no choice but to bring Amy inside, and Sue even invited Amy to join them for dinner, but Amy explained that her stomach had turned into mush. Eating solid food would just cause it to fall out from below, and a single piece of chocolate could ruin her dress. Because Amy's statements were so shocking, Kieran quickly took her to see his room. Amy asked Kieran about his cause of death, but Kieran didn't want to answer. So, Amy showed him the wound on her stomach, revealing she died from leukemia. Kieran then showed Amy the scars on his wrists. Amy, seeing Kieran's scars, couldn't help but hug him and whisper comforting words. Yet Kieran's eyes were fixed on Rick's portrait. At that moment, his sister Jem burst in with news of Rick's return, which made Kieran panic. Then, Kieran took Amy to the bar, but Amy's undisguised appearance meant they could only stay in the PDS section. Just then, Rick came out of the bathroom, and Kieran turned to see his once close friend. Their eyes met with intense warmth. Rick was the first to extend his hand, and they awkwardly greeted each other. When they learned that they could only stay in front of the toilet door, Rick was furious and Philip apologized. Inside the bar, Rick and Kieran had a lively chat, leaving Amy out. Seeing Rick continuously drinking beer, Amy reminded him that solids and liquids were poison to them now. But Rick said, "I'm not like you," which immediately annoyed Amy. So, Amy asked him when the stitches on his face would fall off. In the next life perhaps? The atmosphere became tense between them. At that moment, the patrolling Dean ran into the bar, loudly announcing that zombies had been spotted in the wild. Seeing this, Bill immediately gathered his men to go hunt down the zombies. Rick suggested taking Kieran along. When they reached the destination, Rick found an excuse to stay in the car with Kieran, asking him why he committed suicide. Kieran's response was that nothing mattered to him after Rick's death. He had no desire to live. Rick was filled with self-blame at this answer. Just then, Bill's voice came through the radio, urging them to catch up quickly. They had no choice but to end their conversation and head deeper into the forest. At this moment, Kieran found the trail of zombies. The tall zombies hunted a wild goat. He put the meat on the leaves and handed it to the small zombies beside him. The scene somehow felt warm, but Rick's voice startled them, and the two zombies staggered away. Though too slowly, Dean suddenly appeared from ahead, tasering the smaller zombie to the ground. As Dean gloated, the larger zombie attacked him, biting his leg, scaring Dean to the point of nearly shooting himself to end it all.
By one, you turn it 120 seconds flat!
It's been more than 20 seconds though, hasn't it?
After the commotion, Bill asked Rick how to deal with the two zombies, whether to send them to the hospital for treatment or to execute them on the spot.
You do the honors. You're a better shot than me.
Rick was about to execute the zombies in the distance but was stopped by Kieran. Kieran even revealed his own zombie appearance to do so.
Like me? You're gonna shoot me as well. Do it!
Convinced by Kieran's plea, Rick eventually put down his shotgun, which made Bill explode in rage. Just when Bill was about to deal with the zombies himself, Kieran loudly suggested that live zombies could fetch a handsome bounty from the government. Do you really want to turn down money? He challenged. Kieran's suggestion won over the others, but it was a direct blow to Bill's pride. Bill, left with no choice, dropped Kieran off halfway and made him walk home. Back home, Bill grew angrier as he thought about it, blaming his son Rick for not following his commands and questioning his authority. Meanwhile, Kieran found himself at the village's supermarket, guided by memories of the past. As Kieran turned a corner, memories of becoming a zombie flashed back to him, revealing that Jem was there at that time, and she had not fired her gun. So, Kieran sought out his sister to ask why she hadn't killed him back then, especially since the girl he attacked was Jem's close friend. But Jem painfully stated, "You're still my brother. Even if you became a zombie, you're still my brother." Then, Kieran decided to confess to Lisa's parents, with Jem insisting on accompanying him. They arrived at Lisa's house, where her parents still handed them their daughter's missing person flyer. Kieran looked at the flyer in his hand and mustered the courage to tell them that Lisa hadn't gone missing, but had been attacked by him in his zombie state. Hearing this, the parents sighed in relief because it meant their daughter had become a zombie and could potentially be cured at a hospital to regain her humanity. But Kieran knew he had eaten Lisa's brain, making it impossible for her to become a zombie. Just as Kieran was about to reveal this, Jem stopped him, perhaps letting them believe their daughter had become a zombie would keep their hope alive. Then they left. On the way, Jem's view of Kieran changed dramatically. Although her brother was now a zombie, Kieran was still the brother she knew well. Then, Kieran spotted Amy at the bus station across the street and approached her, learning she was leaving Roarton village. It turned out that the village militia had recently marked her house with a PDS sign, but Amy's attitude is one of disinterest, and her maverick behavior infuriates the man. So, a man barged into Amy's room, aggressively grabbed her hair, and smeared her face with makeup from the table.
In this village, you cover up your rotten face. Got it?
Looking at her reflection, Amy finally made up her mind. Knowing the undead prophet had established a commune for the unwelcome PDS sufferers, Amy believed she could live there with dignity. Amy invited Kieran to leave with her, but Kieran couldn't let go of Rick, so they said their goodbyes with a tight hug. On the other side, after attending a church meeting, Audie pulled Bill aside.
Come in, Bill. The Lord will bring back the proper, the righteous, the true souls that we miss so dearly.
It's the same old.
Afterward, Bill went back home and taught Rick how to deliver a lethal stab with a dagger, ordering Rick to kill Kieran. Bill believed Kieran was the devil in disguise, and they were fighting for God. But Rick found an excuse to lock himself in the bathroom. Looking in the mirror, Rick covered the gruesome wound on his face, and the reflection seemed to revert to his former self, the obedient son in his father's eyes. But was this really what Rick wanted? Soon after, Rick came out.
I don't want to hurt Ren. He's my best mate. If Ren's evil, Dad.
Hearing Rick's words, Bill seemed to regain his fatherly tenderness, embracing Rick in his arms. Later, Bill retrieved Rick's portrait from the attic and covered the PDS sign on the garage door. When Rick's mother returned,
Where's Rick?
Rick?
Kieran had just gotten home and found Rick collapsed in front of the door. He rushed to check, but Rick was already pale as death, with Bill's dagger stuck in the back of his head. This scene left Kieran helpless. He tried to wake Rick but in vain. Kieran could only whisper to Rick the words he had never said before, but it was all too late. Then, Kieran pulled the dagger from Rick's head. He found Bill, who was still leisurely watching TV, which enraged Kieran beyond measure. Kieran plunges the dagger in front of Bill and asks him why he's doing this. Bill said that the dead would rise again, and this time, only the noble dead would awaken, not liars like you or Rick. Rick was possessed by the devil. Otherwise, why would he protect you, a foul-smelling zombie? Next time, my real son will come back.
Right. Your real son did come back? No, he didn't. He came back and he showed you his real self and you killed him for
I got rid of an imposter. Greedy little lies.
He was like me!
Wrong!
He came back and it was a one-shot deal! It was a gift!
Janet couldn't accept this reality. In a fit of emotion, she picked up a dagger and turned it on Bill. The sharp dagger drew blood from his palm, the piercing pain snapping Bill out of it. As a gunshot rang out, the shooter was Ken, whose PDS wife had been killed by Bill. Janet and Kieran rushed out at the sound of the gunshot, and seeing Bill's body, Kieran turned and left. Kieran wandered aimlessly into the wilderness, eventually finding himself at a cave. Ignoring the warnings on the stone walls, he went straight in. This place used to be his and Rick's secret base, with their vows still on the walls. As Kieran reminisced, a figure entered the cave. It was his mother, who had come looking for him. His family was worried something had happened to Kieran, but Kieran wanted to be alone. Blaming himself for Rick's death, Kieran felt disappearing quietly here might spare others any burden. But Sue said, "You're not a burden to anyone. Rick's death was Bill's doing, not yours. If heaven has given you a second life, then live it well. We all love you. Even if you reincarnated as a goldfish, our love for you wouldn't change. And I've felt what you're going through now. Long ago, Sue had met a pilot and thought she had found true love for a lifetime. However, the man cheated on her with her best friend, leaving Sue heartbroken and wanting to end her life. She walked into a pharmacy, but the clerk on duty outright refused to sell her the drugs and made her a pot of hot tea, patiently talking her through the night. That clerk was Kieran's father, Steve. Maybe Steve seems old-fashioned and taciturn to you now, but he really wants to talk to you about everything happening in reality. But he can't come here because you left from this place. Maybe you should go back and have a good talk with him." Moved by his mother's words, Kieran returned home, where his excited father tried to remain composed, simply saying, "Welcome home." However, Kieran expressed he didn't want his father to forgive him so easily. He had left without saying goodbye or informing anyone, completely disregarding his family's feelings. Kieran didn't want such actions to be easily forgiven.
What do you think you were playing at? You had your mother worried sick.
And
you had your sister worried sick and all.
And
I was going to call the police. Because I was worried sick! You just go out, don't tell anyone where you're going, no contact for days. I get there, get to the cave. You're sitting down, you're leaning on a rock. I think, thank God, he's okay. He's okay. I see that Swiss Army knife I got you for your birthday. You're covered in blood. So much blood. I take you in my arms, I run with your arms, I run and I run and I run, but I can't because you...
Later, Kieran personally carried Rick's coffin, holding another funeral for Rick. He decided to live well, for both himself and Rick.